County Community Reads program that I decided to bring a little something along for one special person. And there's some goodies in there, a signed edition of, a hardcover edition of Crooked River, as well as, and no one else has this yet, my next book, an advanced reader's copy of my next book, which is coming out in August.
Tell us the name.
It's called Everything We Lost. There are also 2 other books in there that are favorite books of mine that are set in Oregon. And then some sweet treats. And then this bag has a special story. I went into my local bookstore, Broadway Books, and asked them if they sold any cute tote bags, and they're like, not really. We have some stuff behind the counter from publishers, and she was digging around a little bit, and she gets all wide-eyed, and she pulls out this bag, and she's like, this one's signed by Cheryl Strait, do you want it? I was like, well, yeah, so it's a signed bag.
Okay, who's the lucky winner of that bag?
Fingers crossed.
I know, kind of a little narrow.
794-821. One is The Wilding by Benjamin Percy, which is amazing if you haven't read it. It's a bit on the darker side, but it's incredible. Benjamin Percy, who I believe grew up in Oregon. I don't think he lives in Minnesota now, but. And another one is The Hearts of Horses by Molly Gloss, which I'm actually halfway through right now, and I'm really, really enjoying it. It's fantastic. So. And then this is the library provided this one.
Right, there's a bottle of wine, and some lavender honey for the bees, and the library sold these bags this year, so we like the little motto, you can't buy happiness, but you can buy books. Is that
and that's kind of the same thing. That's cute. That's cute. See, that's a cute tote
And
bag.
we also have books in here. We have a softbound, paperback of Crooked River. Marilee Gerke donated a book of poetry, and we have one of Bing's books in there, and other things, little surprises. So, another winner. Trying to crunch them up a little bit.
794-824. All right.
I'm glad I went to somebody over 21. I told her the ticket seller we kind of have to pull the bottle out.
Next year.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So, before Valerie starts talking, I just have to tell you that we're really glad to have her here. She's been out to Crooked River Ranch, she's been to the art gallery, and up to Mazatlan this afternoon, and this is her finale. So we've really enjoyed her visit, and she brought her charming husband with her. And I just would like to say that we're also like to thank our sponsors, who are Adelia and Summer Rodriguez Fund of the Oregon Community Foundation, Jefferson County Library District, and Mountain Photos and Graphics, and he just walked out away from his camera, but that's him back there. Anyway, I'm going to let Valerie take over, and she can tell you, if you can ask her questions about, I'm sorry. This is last call for the drinks over there. And I'm going to let her tell her about herself, and thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, well, thank you all for coming out here tonight, and hope you guys have been enjoying the drinks and the desserts. There's some good-looking lemon bars over there. Feel free to get up at any time to get more desserts. I won't point you out or anything like that. It is an honor for me to be here this evening. I am a huge fan of libraries. I started reading at a pretty early age. My sister, I have an older sister, and she went to kindergarten before me, and she would come home from school and teach me everything that she had learned in her kindergarten classes. So I learned to read at about 3. I was picking up her picture books, and then by 1st or 2nd grade, I was reading chapter books. I grew up in a family where we couldn't really afford to buy new books all the time, so we would go to the library. My mom would take me out there pretty much whenever I asked, and I would just come home with armfuls of books, read them, and then the next day I need to go and get more books. And I still do that to this day. I still use the library quite often, and I'll come out with armfuls of books. I started writing at a pretty early age too, I think partly because I was reading so early. One of the first stories I wrote was in kindergarten. It was a classroom assignment. And it was about a girl who bought a red balloon, and the red balloon got away from her. I think it had a rather tragic ending. I think the balloon popped or something. The girl was sad. Now, Crooked River is technically my second published book. The first one I self-published in 3rd grade. It is called The Little Raccoon. I also did the illustrations. It is about a raccoon. Good, the title is accurate. Named Rascal, who lived in the trees in the forest, and he played with his friends, and one day his friends go missing. And Rascal is distressed by this, and he decides to go try and find them. He looks everywhere, can't find them. Hold on, let me get to the good part. He goes into the town. There's this, I should have read this before I came here, but there's this cat. There's this cat, and he's got a little, little hobo bag over his shoulder. He's gonna ride the rails. I don't know what he's doing, but he tells Rascal that everybody was chased out of this town by this giant green monster. This story did not end well either, but for different reasons. In the end, Rascal wakes up to find that it was all a dream. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that you do not do that to a reader. That is the worst way to end the book. So, luckily I learned from that experience. Shortly after I wrote that, an author came to my school library and gave a presentation about writing, about her life as an author. And in my mind, this author is Madeleine L'Engle, who wrote A Wrinkle in Time. And I don't know if that's true or not. I've tried to figure out who it was, but the school doesn't keep records of her back or something, I don't know. But it might have she might just be in my head because she was one of my favorite authors growing up, but I like to think that it was really her, and that she was the reason that I decided to become a writer. I remember sitting there, it was kind of like a situation like this, except you would all be sitting on the floor, legs crossed. But she was talking about writing, and I realized, oh, there are people who do this. There's people who write these books that I read and love so much. I can do that. And I wasn't really sure about the logistics of it. I just figured, I'll write a story and I'll figure out the rest of it later. So growing up, I either wanted to be a writer or a veterinarian. Those were my two options. And until I realized that I could not handle blood and needles very well. So then writer became the only option. After I graduated high school, I moved to Southern California, to Costa Mesa, California. I attended a small private university there. They didn't have a really great creative writing program. They pretty much did not have a creative writing program at all. The only creative writing professor there, was he wrote screenplays and plays. What do you call those? Just plays? And that's like the Hollywood, LA area, so everybody wants to write scripts, but not me. I wanted to write novels for some strange reason. And I managed to convince this professor to do an independent study with me. I went into his office and I said, I want to be a writer when I grow up, and I would like to have some time writing and some feedback on my writing, and you guys don't offer the kind of class that I want, so can I do an independent study with you? And he told me no. So I walked out, I cried a little bit. That was my first rejection. And I said, if I want to do this thing, I can't just let that no be no. So I went back in there, I sat down, I'm serious about this. I will write, because he had a problem with students taking this independent study and then not writing. And they would just try to get this easy A. And I was like, no, I will write stories for you. And I was all ready to write him a whole novel. And he was like, no, I don't want a whole novel. Don't write me a whole novel. So I was able to write some short stories with him and get a little feedback on that. I got a degree in English, but it was mostly just like literature. I basically decided to major in that because I could spend my time reading books and writing things. That sounds good to me. After I graduated from college, I moved to Riverside, California, which is where my husband grew up. And we got married out there. And I don't, how many of you been to Riverside, California? One, two, a couple. It's pretty dry out there. Not a lot of water. There's some trees, orange trees, pretty orange trees. And when I first went to Riverside, it was green. It was the hills were beautiful and green, but I went in December during the rainy season. So then when I moved out there and lived out there for a whole year, I was like, I can't do this. It's too dry out here. It's hot. I don't belong here. Because I grew up in the Willamette Valley. I grew up in Albany, Oregon. We moved there when I was about 6 months old, and that's kind of just where I spent my whole life. So I was used to the damp and the rain and the tall trees and the mushrooms growing between your toes. And so I said to Ryan, I was like, hey, what do you think about moving to Portland? He's like, yeah, let's do it, not knowing what he was getting into. So we moved out there, and the first year he's like, what is this water? Well, he's used to it now, I think, maybe, I don't know. This year was a little much for him. So we moved to Portland about 10 years ago, I believe now. We've been in Portland about 10 years. And I had considered going to get a master's in fine arts, and that is an advanced degree in creative writing, and a lot of writers have it. But I couldn't afford it, and I really actually don't really like school. I do really well at it, but I am more of a self-learner. I like to read my own books. I don't like to read the assignments. So, in fact, the only time I ever got in trouble at school was in 3rd grade when the teacher was reading Bridge to Terabithia out loud to the students, and I had already read it just like the past week. I was like, I've already read this. And I was reading a book under my desk. And the teacher, I got a little bit of a lecture after that. So I decided that instead of going to get a master's in fine arts, that I would teach myself how to write. And I did that by checking out books from the library, writing books, like how to write books. So Anne Lamott has a great one called Bird by Bird. Stephen King's On Writing is also a good one. There's an agent, I believe his name is Donald Mass, and he has a couple of really good how to write books, and I read those. And I went to writers' conferences, which are fantastic for beginning writers or even intermediate writers. It's kind of a great place to learn more about the craft and to meet other writers and to just kind of get inspired. I also read a lot of novels. Novels are a great way to learn how to write, because you can find the ones that you like and read them and figure out why you like them and how the writer did this and that. You can also find ones you don't like, read those and figure out why you don't like them. I'm never going to do that. So for instance, the little raccoon guy here, I'm never going to have my characters waking up at the end of the book and say, it's all just a dream. So I also wrote a lot. Before Cricket River found an agent and was published, I wrote about 6 novels that will never see the light of day. We were actually talking about this at the Mazatlan Restaurant earlier. And we were talking about how maybe parts of them might resurface someday in book form, but I will never take one of those old drafts and decide that this is good enough, because they were pretty terrible. They were pretty embarrassing stories. Sorry. The concepts were okay, but the execution, Ryan embarrassed me, and now I'm going to embarrass myself, but there was one book I wrote where the main character was cleaning all the time. She was just, that's what she spent her time doing. She wasn't doing anything exciting. She just walked into her room and started to clean and think about her life. So that is also a thing you should not do if you're writing a book. Like, that's boring. No one wants to read that. I started writing Cricket River as a distraction because I had recently finished another book, and this was a post-apocalyptic virus book that I was really proud of. Like I was thinking that was going to be my first book, and I was excited about it. And I was sending it out on submission, trying to find an agent or a publisher for it, and I was getting nothing but rejections. And rejections are hard to get. They're not fun. It's not like you get a rejection, you're like, yes, another rejection. So happy. There are writers who actually will like tack them up on the wall as like proud moments, and no, mine went into a drawer or into the garbage, did not want to see them. So I decided that the only way to kind of make myself feel better was to do what I love doing, which is writing. So I decided to write another book. And that's when I started writing Crooked River. And the inspiration for the book kind of came from two places. The first is that I had been wanting to write a book about sisters for a while, because of my sister. I wanted to kind of explore that relationship. And then the second was that, is this still on? It's going to know. That's all right. The second point was that I had been reading about minimalism and living off the grid, and I read about a man who left his family and moved to Joseph, Oregon, and he dug a little hobbit hole and lived there and made art, and he had this like journal that he sent out to people. And I was kind of intrigued by him, but more than that, I was intrigued by his family and what they must have thought about it all. And so I decided to kind of explore those elements in a fictionalized world. I originally started out writing a short story, but Sam and Ollie's voices kind of took over and pretty quickly, and I realized that they would need a whole novel for their story. It was also going to be, I was attempting to make this grand work of art, this very character-driven, inner soul kind of book, and I was boring myself to death. I just did not want to work on it. And then I was like, well, what happens if you add a dead body? So I tried that. That was pretty entertaining. So it kind of went from there. So that was kind of the beginning of it. It's a story about growing up, and it's a story about family, and about the ways we get lost and the ways we get found, and it's a story about grief. And it's also one of the most personal stories that I've ever written. On August 1st of 2002, 6 days before her 49th birthday, my mom died of a pulmonary embolism. I was 19. And losing a parent at any age is a strange thing. It's never fun. It's never like something that you look forward to. But losing a parent at 19 is very disorienting. 19, technically, you're an adult. You're living on your own. You're paying rent, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. But you're driving. You can vote. You can do all these things and make all these decisions. And yet you're really just on the cusp of adulthood. You've just crossed that barrier. And there's so many things that you still have to learn, and like your parents are supposed to be there to offer you advice and answer questions and kind of guide you through these milestones like graduation and first jobs and marriage and kids and publishing your first book. And so at 19, when you lose a parent, it's a strange thing because you think you have more time. I know that I thought I had more time. So I was home that summer from college. I just finished my freshman year, and I was working a temp job at an insurance company, and just hanging out with old friends and spending time with family. And there wasn't like any foreboding or any, hint that something terrible is going to happen at the end of the summer. We were just kind of going along, and I imagined that I would spend the rest of my summer at my job and hanging out with my friends and talking to my mom about the future and the classes I was going to take, and boys, and where I was going to go from here on out. And then I'd leave and go back to school in the fall, and then because we had been talking on the phone every Sunday, we would have a Sunday conversation, and I was like, oh, we'll just keep doing that. She and my dad went to Hawaii for their 25th wedding anniversary in July, and they left me with my sister at home to just create chaos, I guess. But we got a call from my dad a couple days after they were in Hawaii, and he said, oh, your mom and I were hiking, and she fell, and she tore her ACL on the rocks, and she's fine. The paramedics came, they pulled her from the rocks. She's embarrassed. She's completely embarrassed by it, but they took her to the hospital, and she's in a brace, and it's fine, we're gonna finish out our vacation, and then come home. This wasn't the first time that she had torn her ACL. She had a similar accident when I was quite young, when I was 8 or 9. We were at a skating party, skating rink, and some kid fell in front of her and she tripped over him. The EMTs came and took her out then, and I was the one that was embarrassed at that time. I was like, oh gosh, Mom. So that time, she didn't even need surgery, it just healed on its own. So we kind of had that as our background. We're like, okay, this isn't a big deal. Like my dad said, they finished off their vacation and they flew home. And she was in a brace, and it was clear she was in pain, but she was, doing fine. And we were pushing her around in a wheelchair, and she showed us pictures of her trip. And she made an appointment with her doctor, and they made an appointment for her to have surgery. She did not make that surgery. The morning of August 1st, she woke up and she couldn't breathe. She couldn't really communicate with us. I called 911, and the EMTs came and they took her to the hospital. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last time that I saw her alive. My dad and I followed her to the hospital. And I don't really remember too much about that day. It kind of comes in, flashes, and there's a lot of blank things, a lot of things that I don't know what happened, or I don't know the whole story. I just remember we're waiting in the emergency room. The doctor comes out and says that a blood clot moved from her leg into her lungs, and they're trying to give her blood thinners to keep her alive. And it feels literally like the next second they came out to say that she had passed, that she had died. And I just remember thinking, you've got to be kidding me. What? That can't be right. And then the next thing I was thinking, now what? Now what am I supposed to do? I can't go back to college. I can't do anything. The world has to stop turning. My mom is dead. That means the world has to stop turning. We have to stop now. And obviously the world does not stop turning. My life has to go on. And I had to figure out a way to live without her. And in all honesty, I did not set out to write a book about a dead mother. I tried to avoid it. I was not ready to talk about it. I did not want to touch that part of my personal history with the 10-foot pole. I started writing Crooked River 10 years after she died, I believe. That sounds about right. I tried to figure out how to make the book work with Sam and Ollie's mother still alive, because I was not ready to write about this topic. But as I got into it, I realized that if Sam and Ollie's mother was alive and Bear was arrested, the girls would just go home, live with their mother, the story would be over. They would have no reason, no drive to try and figure out who had really done it. So I took a deep breath. I said, okay, Sam and Ollie are going to be motherless like me. I'm going to have to work through that. Writing has always been a calming and cathartic exercise for me. It's the way that I best communicate with the world and with other people. It's the way I'm most comfortable. But when I wrote Crooked River, I found writing to be really healing. It was a way for me to... So like I said, my mom had been dead for about 10 years, and I had worked through a lot of the grief already and had moved on as much as one can. But working through this book and writing a motherless story, I was able to delve a little deeper into my own pain and kind of work through some of the stuff through Sam and Ollie's eyes and through their lives, and their tears were my tears and their triumphs were my triumphs. I never got to say goodbye to my mom. The dedication for this book reads in part in loving memory of my mother. And in many ways, this book became like a goodbye letter to her. A way for me to spend more time with her, a way for me to kind of say, hey, I miss you. I wish you were here, that kind of thing. And on August 1st of 2013, So 11 years after my mother's death, I spoke on the phone with a woman named Emily Crump. And Emily is an editor at William Morrow. And she said, hey, I loved your book. I love everything about it. I want to publish it. I want to work with you. Let's do this. So on August 7th, so what would have been my mom's 59th birthday, I agreed to work with Emily. Basically, they bought my book that day. And it was kind of this just wonderfully serendipitous moment where it just felt right. Like, I'd spent my whole life wanting to be a writer, and my mom had supported that dream in many ways. By taking me to the library, by reading my little stories and telling me they were wonderful, by encouraging me to go to college, and it was perfect that my first book that I had started writing on a whim, like as a distraction from another book, that this book was going to be the one that was going to be my debut novel that was going to be published. I still miss my mom. I mean, of course, every day I do. The pain lessens, but it's still there. It doesn't really get any easier to live in this world without her. But I think that the pain is less because of this book, because I was able to write this story. There's something about art, about the act of creation, that has the power to take the broken pieces of ourselves and kind of mend it. And yeah, there's still scars, there's still cracks. It's never going to be the same as it was before. But you can still find strength and courage to keep going. Books are a comfort, and they're safe places to go to explore the hard feelings and the hard parts of life. They usually, hopefully, they have happy endings. I guess there's some books out there that don't, they're good too. Stories can build bridges between people, and they can knock down barriers and encourage empathy, and the stories are important. They're powerful. I believe in them. I believe that they can change lives. I know that books, stories have changed my life. I am certain that there are people in here who have been changed by a story or two. And I just think that now more than ever, stories are important. And I think that when you leave here tonight, whatever you can do to continue supporting stories, storytellers, writers, artists, libraries that support writers and artists, your local bookstore, that that this world would be a better place and we would be better people. So, thank you. So I am willing to answer questions at this point, if you have any, about the book, about writing, about what I like to eat on Friday nights. If you have a question, you can shout it out or raise your hand or, yeah.
Did you feel like once you wrote a story that you would put personal emotion into, that's the way it has to be for most writers? Or is it writer by writer basis that's when they seem to hit their moment?
Good question, hard question. So she asked about writing emotionally, I believe, and whether writers need to hit that emotional spot and they feel like that's the book, is that kind of the question? So I think that the best books come from a place, an emotional place for the writer. I have written books that are not, where I don't draw from myself somehow, and they just aren't as powerful, they're not as strong, the characters don't pop off the page as much. I don't think that you have to write necessarily like an autobiographical or semi-autobiographical novel for it to be powerful. But I think that you do have to draw from something, some part of your emotional self. I think a lot of writers do. I think there are probably some who don't. I don't want to name names. But I think that For me, it helps to tap into my emotional being in order to understand the characters better. If I do that, the characters can tend to come to life a little more, whereas if I'm kind of cutting my own emotions off, I'm like, I'm not going to be emotional about this, then the characters are flat and stereotypical and just like cut out cardboard, and nobody wants to read about those kind of characters. So, yeah. Most of you got your questions answered at the book club event.
What about your new book? How many people have heard?
So the new book is called Everything We Lost, and it is set in Bishop, California, and it's about a young man. He is 16, and he is really into UFO culture, and he really wants to try and prove the existence of aliens on Earth. He goes missing when he's 16, and 10 years later, his younger sister returns to their hometown and reconnects with her estranged mother and tries to figure out what happened to her brother. So there are some similar elements between the two books. There's the suspense element, the complicated family issues, as well as some paranormal aspects. That book was a lot harder to write than Crooked River. It took 2 years, whereas Crooked River took about 8 months. And I think part of it was that with Crooked River, I was writing it for myself, and I didn't ever think anyone was going to read it. And with Everything We Lost, it's like, oh no, people are going to read this probably, and they're going to compare it to Crooked River, and they're probably going to hate it. So it was kind of a little bit of, and then when I was trying to write it, I was throwing in everything. Like, put this in there, put that in there, the kitchen sink's gonna go in there, and it turned into this monster. It was like a 500-page book, and we had, I cut it down, but it's still like 450 pages. It's a big one. We maybe could pull it out. We should pull it out. We should show it. We should show it off.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a chunkster. But what's nice about this one, so it did take a little bit longer to write it, but I think I finally got it into the shape where I'm proud to have my name on it. And what's nice is that it's coming out in paperback first, so we're skipping the hardcover. So none of this, I can't afford hardcovers. Just go out and buy the paperback. It'll be cheap. It'll be good. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. I think it's coming out on August 15th. Right around the solar eclipse, so maybe I should work that into the next one.
Yeah.
Do credible aliens show up? Is that a spoiler if I answer that? Nolan thinks there are aliens in this book. His sister does not think there are aliens in this book. So I will you can read it and then you can let me know if there are aliens in this book.
What's your process? Would you write every day, sit down at your computer?
Yeah. What is my process? Messy. Let's see. I'm going to talk about, okay, so I'll start it this way. When I first come up with an idea for a book, it's usually a very small idea. It's not the whole story. It's something tiny that if you looked at it, you can't make a whole story from this, you can't make a whole novel. And then I'll start to ask questions about it, like what happens with this, and what if you add this, and what about adding this character? And then it kind of builds out. I will write longhand in a notebook for the first couple months that I'm drafting, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I will write whatever comes to my head, even if it doesn't make sense for the plot or the characters, just a brainstorming. And then at some point I have an idea of what I want the whole book, the whole picture to look like, And when I get that, and I feel like, okay, I have this idea of like what I want it to look like in the end, or what I want, where I want to go, where I want these characters to end up, then I'll usually do a rough outline. It's not very detailed, but kind of try to get some pivotal scenes in there, and then I will sit down at a computer, and I usually write in the morning. That's my most creative time for some reason. And depending on what else I have going on in my life, so this past week I've been writing in the mornings and then working on getting ready for this presentation in the afternoons. But there are some days where I can write in the morning and afternoon. So I'm a full-time writer. I don't have any other job except taking care of the dog and my husband, I guess. But he's good about taking care of himself. So I try to write as much as possible when I'm in that early drafting stage, because it's if you step away for me anyway, if I step away from a book for too long, I kind of lose the voice and the feel and the rhythm, and it's harder to get back into the writing. So I will work on a draft until I think it's ready, and then I'll send it to a writing friend to get feedback, or I'll send it to my agent to get feedback, and then I'll do more edits until it feels like I can share this with people I don't know. And then that's when I know it's done. Is it ever done? I don't know. We were talking about everything we lost at the book club today, and so they were talking about some of them had been to Bishop, and they were telling me all these cool things, and I was like, oh, I want to add it to the book, but it's already done, I can't. So don't tell me things about Bishop. Anything else?
I was just going to ask if you would talk again about the element of the bees. I love what you said about that at our book club meeting.
Oh, yeah. So the bees came into the book because I wanted to give Sam and her father a connection, a way for them to, something that they could do together. It was kind of something I wanted to have so that Bear could look like a caring father, so he would be a little bit more sympathetic. And originally I had planned for Sam to be kind of a all-inclusive bug enthusiast. She's just going to be like crawling around on her hands and knees with tweezers and magnifying glasses and picking up bugs. I started doing research on bugs, which is a weird thing. I don't know if I'd recommend it. Bugs are come crawling. And the more I read about, so I was reading about insects, and then I'd always come to the bee section. And the bees were the coolest bugs. They were just really neat. And there were all these little touches of like mythology and the way they worked that fit so well with the book and with Bear and his family. And so I decided to just focus on the bees, just have Sam and Bear have their little beehive together. And I took a beekeeping class as I was writing the book, and it was like one day we were in the classroom and the beekeeper brought all his equipment and kind of gave a little spiel about how to take care of bees. And then the next day we went out to his house and he showed us his hives, and he like opened up the hives and gave us all a taste of like fresh honeycomb from the hive, which if you have never had it, put that on your bucket list. Like it just melts in your mouth warm. And I kind of took a lot of his mannerisms, the beekeeper's mannerisms, and gave them to Bear, because this man was just so, the way he moved around the bees was just so elegant, and like he had a relationship with them, basically. So I feel like the bees, I was really happy with the way they worked out in the book, with just how they worked with Bear and Sam, but then also just throughout the rest of the book as kind of a metaphor for, I don't know, you guys can decide what they're metaphor for. I'm not going to tell you that. That'll be your assignment. You can go home, write a 5-page essay on the metaphors that you heard. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Anything else you're dying to know? Last chance. Until next year, next fall. Yes.
Do you identify with either Sam or Ollie?
Oh, do I identify with Sam or Ollie? I identify with both of them for different reasons, but perhaps with Ollie a little bit more. because she's the youngest. And she was a little bit easier for me to write. I originally wrote the book just in Sam's perspective. I wasn't planning on having Ollie have a voice at all, have chapters. But I got to the end and there's something missing. So I gave Ollie some chapters, and hers were so easy to write. And I think part of that was because I had already written the book once, and so it was just kind of a matter of like inserting her chapters in. But then I think also it was just her voice felt closer to mine because of the younger sister aspect and just the way that she's quiet and kind of book nerdy. So I'm a little bit more with Ollie, I guess, but that seems like choosing favorite children.
What are some of your other favorite books?
My other favorite books, so many. Tana French I'm a really big fan of Tana French's. She writes mysteries that are set in Ireland. It's an Ireland detective series. Margaret Atwood is one of my favorite authors. The Handmaid's Tale is a great book, but I also like her book Alias Grace, which is, I believe it is also a murder mystery of sorts. I read it a long time ago, and it's really great, but I can't really remember the plot right now. I just finished a book that I really enjoyed. You know, it's one of those things where I read a lot, and I love so many of them, and I should have them on the tip of my brain to tell you, but when people ask me this question, I just go, hey, I know I just read a really good book. What was it? I don't remember.
So when you come up with a really great idea, are you worried that, oh, I read this and that's why I think it's a really great idea? How do you know that it's your idea?
How do I know that it's my idea? Nothing is new under the sun. There are no new ideas, is the sad thing. I am terrified of that, actually. I'm terrified of being redundant. But I think that there are only a few different plot lines out there. There's not a whole lot. I'm not an experimental writer. I think I tried to be once and it didn't really work out. I really like stories that make sense and have a plot that flows and characters that you can connect with. I think what makes books different from each other, so they don't all look the same, is the writer's touch. So whatever that writer brings to it. So I'm hoping that I'm bringing by me bringing my imagination and my life story, my history, as short as it is, and all the things that I learned, the things I think, that I can kind of twist those old ideas into something that is new or something that's fresh. There are some times when I write a sentence, I'm like, that sentence is great. I must have copied it from someone. And I will admit something to you. This does not leave this room. I have Googled sentences that I've written just to make sure that it doesn't pop up in some famous person's book, right? So far I haven't found it. I mean, wouldn't that be really embarrassing? They're just this sentence was written by, we'll say Margaret Atwood. I remember she wrote this sentence. Oh. But I think that part of reading, I think reading a lot is good because I learn a lot of different things and get a lot of different stuff into my brain that kind of composts and I can regurgitate it as something new. But I think that there is kind of that it can be a little nerve-wracking because there is that fear of am I going to accidentally steal from somebody and just not know it until they point it out to me and I'm getting a lawsuit and I try not to think about stuff like that because I won't write if I thought about that. So that's a good question. I haven't gotten that one ever. So.
Why did you choose Ollie to be the one that was missing? Why could she see her mom? Is it because she was younger or just special about her?
That is also a question I never got. You guys are on fire tonight. I excellent. I don't have a good reason. I think partly because she was younger, it felt like, well, okay. So, I may have an answer for you. As a younger sister, you kind of are in the shadow of the big sister. At least this is true in my relationship. I don't know if it's true of all sisters, but in my relationship, my sister talks a lot. She talks loud. She wants to be the center of attention. And I'm, hanging back. You do your thing, Christy. You just do what you need to do. And she's always been like standing up for me, and I'm quiet and shy, introverted, and I'd rather be like behind my book and not, And so she's always been the one that's like taking charge. And if somebody makes fun of me or slights me, she's the one standing up. Don't do that to my sister. So I think there was partly this idea that like the younger sister would be the one who would be struggling to find her voice, to like get her older sister to listen to her. As far as like the mystical part, I didn't want, so I wanted whoever saw the ghost to not be able to tell the other people that, these ghosts told me these, I know what happened, here, let me tell you. So whoever saw the ghost had to be the one who couldn't talk. Ollie had to be the one who couldn't talk because she was younger. So that's kind of a complicated question. I don't know, did I answer that? Did I see? I feel like I saw it.
So if you could invite 4 people to dinner, would you do that, or would you sit with your book alone?
If I could invite 4 people to dinner or sit with my book alone, I guess it depends on the people. Are these like...
I know you would have invited everybody.
Yes. Yeah, he makes a good point. It depends on the book too. If it's a good book, maybe I choose the book. But sometimes I get halfway through a book and I'm like, it's time to invite people over for dinner. So, I think it depends on the night.
Do you think that maybe odd because your gender processed your grief different, and that's why she saw the shivering and she processed her grief?
Yeah, definitely that. I think it came into play that Ollie processed her grief differently, and so she saw the shiverings that way, whereas Sam kind of moved through it pretty easily, or didn't. Guys, it's been a long time since I've read my own book. I might need some clip notes. That was one thing I was really nervous about when I was coming here. I was like, they're going to ask me questions, and I haven't read it in a long time. I don't know if I ever will, though. I heard this author, she wrote something on Facebook or something where she had just picked up her book after 9 years of not reading it. She was like surprised by herself. She was like, I'm not that terrible. So maybe I'll wait 10 years and read it again and see how I feel. We're good? All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It was a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to talk with you all.
So I put your poster in here, a couple posters and a couple bookmarks. I don't, real copies, but then the committee bought this for you and took a few other things.
You guys are too nice to me. Thank you. Oh, you don't have to. Just put me on the spot. Okay, I'm gonna turn this off. I feel like we should be playing music right now. Something, huh? I hated Christmas time when everyone was watching movies. You shouldn't have wrapped this. No, you didn't. Guys, these are some of the photos that the high school students took. They were assigned to read the book or read parts of the book and then take pictures that represented the book. And two of my favorites, I mean, I feel bad for favorites, but
We won't tell them.
this was like one of the shimmering ones. I thought that not matches, but it looks pretty close to the Videographer is published in France, and they gave it the cover that was very similar to this one. So
So how many countries are you from?
4: France, Germany, Holland, and Japan. Yeah, and I have copies of every one but Japan. I really want to get the Japan one because they do this really neat. Yeah, they do a really neat folding with it. Thank you so much.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Goodness. I'm gonna hang these above my desk.